let's get going with this. Okay, welcome everybody to what's new for Squirrel365 in version 1.18. So this one's been a little while coming. I think our last release was back in June last year. So there's some exciting new stuff coming in this one, and a lot of pre-work for something else that's coming soon, which will get mentioned too. Rich, I might as well hand straight over to you, I think, and you can start taking us through some of these new features.
Yeah, perfect. Thanks. Now, as Mel said, we're going through the what's new, not everything, but just some of the key features that we've got coming in 1.18, which is due out next week. So we'll go through and give examples and some demonstrations of some of these new features, and then we'll talk about the design in the browser, which is being soft launched in 1.18 as well. So let's have a look then. So get my demo up. So the first thing we're going to be looking at is the new start page experience. If I bring up Squirrel, you can see here the new start page experience. It's a new landing page when you launch and log into the Squirrel application. There's some things that are familiar and there are some things which are different. And we'll go through those. So you can see on the landing page here, we've got an updated and a refreshed recent projects list. You can see a combination of cloud and local, which would describe what those are in a moment. We've also got an updated view for published apps, so you can have a quick jumping off point to view your published projects and having what those links are and open those projects as well. We've got at the top here some templates. So these templates across the top are randomly selected from all the templates we have available, so you can use these as a jumping off point to create an application within Squirrel, or you can click on the browse or template option and actually go to a complete list and catalog of all our template options as well. As you can see on the left hand side, we've got a new menu system here. So you've got a link to the community, so you can jump into the community and ask help and ask questions and help other people. And we've got some new options here, which we'll deep dive in a moment. So custom fonts, the image library and files, which we'll have a look at as well. So let's have a look at those external fonts. So Squirrel's always had the ability to support customers using external fonts, so they're providing their own fonts for use within Squirrel. However, it's never been very user-friendly or very intuitive to use custom fonts. And every time you updated Squirrel, it overwrote the custom fonts. So historically, there was a file called external fonts list JSON, which I'm showing on the screen now, and this is a file that got shipped with Squirrel, and then you could add your own custom fonts in here, and then they would appear in the Squirrel designer. Again, not very user-friendly. You had to know where all the URLs were, had to then save this file, because every time you upgraded Squirrel, it overwrote that file and got rid of it. So moving into 1.18, we've now got an option on the left-hand side called custom fonts. And this now is a web portal where you can upload your fonts, and we'll handle all that external fonts list for you. So you can see I've got Roberto Black installed, I've got Roberto Thin. I can change whether I want the fallback to be a serif or a sans serif font. Let me upload a new font. So select a new font, and let's have a look at Roberto Medium. I've added that in, it's now available. If I go back to Squirrel and start a new project and bring a text label in, if I have a look in the fonts now, you can see Roberto Medium is now available in there. If I go back to the fonts list and remove Medium, and then go back to the project, Roberto Medium is now gone as well. Previously, when you edited that external fonts list, you had to close Squirrel, reopen Squirrel for it to be available. Now it's an immediately available application, and that will be usable both for locally exported projects as well as cloud-hosted projects as well. So next in our list is the asset library. So the asset library, or the image library as we see here, is a location where we can store and reuse images for Squirrel projects. Previously in Squirrel, if you wanted to use a image, for example, a logo or some other assets, you'd have to store those. And then every project, you'd have to go and file, browse for those and select them. And if someone else wanted to use that logo, you'd have to then provide that. So the image library is the first step in 1.18, is to have a central place just for you. But the idea in future releases is the ability to share these assets amongst other people as well. So let's have a look. So if I upload an image, I can either drag and drop it in, or I can click to browse and choose this image here. So it's a nice little picture of a squid. Got that loaded up into here now. So now I can now use that in my Squirrel projects. So if we have a look at the image component here, we've now got an option in the image component, which is My Library. You can still use remotely hosted images or Unsplash, or you can still upload a file if you wanted to, but My Library will give me access to all the images I've got. So if I select my little squid, I've now got that available to us in the Squirrel project as well. And as part of the upload, we've converted and compressed the file to make it as small as possible, but also maintaining that quality of the image. So when you're viewing your exported project at runtime, so when your users are looking at it, the smaller file size should load that image up a lot faster when you're viewing it as well. So you don't have to upload your image via the asset library. You can also do it from the component itself. So we've got the upload image button, and it's the same experience. You can do it direct from the component, so you don't have to leave the Squirrel project if you're in there, but you can then do that and then use that elsewhere. So as I said, for 1.18, this is just purely for you, so it's your library, but the idea in the future release will be able to allocate this and share this out, so you can have assets and images that you can share amongst other people in your team as well. So moving on then is the next piece, which is this file section here. So at the moment with Squirrel, if you want to save a file, you do your work, you click save, and it generates a physical file that you store on your desktop. And then if you want to make changes, you save a file again. You have lots of different versions of that same file. For 1.18, we've now added an additional ability. You can still save files locally, but we've also added the ability to save files up to the Squirrel Cloud platform as well. With it being saved in the cloud, it allows you to access this from different locations. You don't have to have the physical file anywhere where you can log into Squirrel. As we talk about Designer in the browser shortly, anyway that you log into Squirrel, you better have access to those Squirrel files. And as it's all stored in the cloud platform, we've also got the ability to do different versioning for you. So you don't need to have multiple versions of the same file. You can have different versions with that as well. So let's have a look at that. So if I go into a project here, I won't save that one. Let me stick this one here. I can save this file now. So if I go to File, Save, it now asks me where I want to save that within my file. I can save to local as usual, or I can save it into my file repository. So let's call it Squid. And that got in there now. You can now see a little green tick at the top that indicates that I've got the file saved, and it's called Squid. If I move the file, it's identified that there is some unsaved changes, so it's letting you know. And we have built into the product, after a period of inactivity or a period of a certain number of changes, it will automatically auto-save that file for you. So if you forget to save and you're making lots of changes behind the scenes, after every X number of changes or after a period of inactivity, it will automatically save that file for you. If I save it myself now, so Control S, pops up and asks me if I want to give it a name. So if I say moved image, I can choose not to ask for this description again, but it can be useful to enable you to provide context as to why you've got different saved versions. So if I save this now, and I click on the cloud icon at the top, so it's green tick, which means all my changes are saved. I can see when it last saved like just now. You can turn autosave off if you don't want it, but also I can go to version history now. I can see the previous versions as well. If I go back to the first one, so it tells you here I've got one component, no functions, no connections. If I go back to that previous one, you can see it gives you the ability to preview and have a look at the different versions as well. So if I give you an example of another one, which over at this project, here's the one, a demo that I've been working on, and you can see for version history, I've got quite a few, 27 versions in here, but quite a few changes. I got some where I've saved myself, so saved is indicating that I've saved it. Auto save is where I've been making some changes, I've not saved it myself, and periodically it has automatically saved it for me. So we can kind of go through these and have a look at different versions. So you can see this is what I did, something I did last year, but it collates it all as well. So it gives you that timeline of the changes you've done as well. So moving on to the next piece then, which is layout containers, or I might refer to it as layout containers, or I might refer to it as mobile grid thingy. Internally, while we were building it and while the UI UX team were coming up with the correct name for it, it's internally referred to as mobile grid thingy. But layout containers or mobile grid thingy gives us the ability to create content for consumption on different devices and different device screen sizes specifically. So let's have a look. So for example, I've got two projects here, two mobile applications. One is a tip calculator. The other one is a form that we created when we were attending a conference to capture some information. We've made it mobile sized. So when we created in 1.17 the project, we specified the size we wanted for the screen. But as you can see, there's some letterboxing around the outsides of the project. This is because we built it for one particular resolution, but then when Apple and other Android devices, as they regularly do, they release new versions of their mobile phones or their devices, and they're always different screen sizes. And so the size I created the project for, this tip calculator, is too small for the mobile devices now. It doesn't fit the bounds correctly. So we've introduced the layout container, so we'll show that in the product very quickly. I'm not going to do a deep dive. We're going to have another session in the next week or so where we can kind of show it in a bit more detail how you can use the mobile layouts and the layout containers. So we've got the option of having row layouts. So this is a container where you can put content into the container, and it will order it and sequence it by rows or by columns. And that in and of itself isn't very useful until we start adding the capability to stretch and fit objects to the parent container that they're in. So for example, I've got this picture of a dog dressed as a squirrel within this container here in the middle. If I tell it to stretch to fit the width of the container, the image will stretch and fit the width of the container automatically. So if my device that I'm viewing this on is a bigger device like an iPad, for example, it will stretch to fill that rather than just being a set size. We've also got the ability to snap these to top and bottom, so it gives you the ability now to not only stretch things to make things fit, but also to anchor them into certain places. So if I want to anchor this to the top, for example, it'll anchor it. Not necessarily useful in this scenario, but if we look at the navigation bar across the bottom here, this is a container that I want to have 4 columns, and I want this to be anchored to the bottom of the screen, so it'll always be at the bottom of the device screen. Similarly, with the title bar across the top, I want that always anchored to the top. And with the containers, we can say, well, I want this top container to be 50 pixels. I want the bottom container to be 75 pixels. And I want everything else in the middle to just fill the gap automatically. So you don't need to specify sizes. You can have just basically the container say, well, fill the rest of the gap for you. So let's have a look at that in action. Here we go. So this is a calculator that we've got. It's one of the templates we've got from our template section. It's a mortgage calculator. And this is before. So this is as the template is at the moment. What we'll do as we go live with 1.18, we'll start creating templates, leveraging the mobile grid thing, the layout containers, sorry, to demonstrate and show how people to use it. But as you can see here, I've got this in the iPhone 12 Pro, I've got a big grey box at the bottom. Using mobile grid thingy, MGT after, I've now told it to stretch and fill. So the title bar is anchored to the top. This section here is anchored to the bottom, and everything in between kind of stretches and fills that for you. I think I've got that in. So here it was before. So before I've got all my containers that is positioned based on the size of this this container here. If I go to the after, I've now got nested containers, and I've specified the top container is of a fixed height of 50 pixels, bottom is 250 pixels, this section here, and the middle is just basically fit to container, just make it fit the rest of that for you. So that's handled that automatically for you. Okay, next then is Mapbox. So Mel, if I hand over to you.
Yeah, is me. Right. Perfect. Share my screen. Let me know if you can see.
Yep.
Cool. Okay, so Mapbox. What we've added is probably our first proper foray into mapping in Squirrel365. So under data viz now, we'll see this Mapbox component. Mapbox, for anyone who's not that familiar, oh look, I can't even draw properly, there we go, familiar with it, is another one of the sort of mapping, I guess Google Maps is the one that everybody thinks of. Mapbox is probably second to that, and you'll see it being used in quite a lot of the applications that have mapping capabilities on your mobile phone and sat navs and things like that. So we've gone with Mapbox for some of the ease of use and the capabilities that it provides. So definitely check it out if you're not already a Mapbox user. What you do need, however, and I'll show as we set this up, is to provide an access token. So it's like your API key, effectively, same as if this was a Google map and you were using the Google Maps API, and you'd have to put your API key in there. We'll get that from Mapbox. So if I just ping over to, if I can find the right one. Here we go. So got a Mapbox account, and then this is the token. This is what we need to get. So there's tokens. There's a whole admin section for generating these tokens, but that one that we saw, just the default public token, will get us what we need here. So let's just pop that in here, and then we'll be able to load a map. That's all we need to add for our own Mapbox account to be able to start visualizing maps and interacting with them. And then we've got a number of configurable styling elements, I suppose, within the map container itself. So we can choose the different types of map. These are all just classic styles that come as default from Mapbox. We can do things like show the zoom and pan control. So these are just all on-offable options that are all about styling and configuring the map for the end user. So what they're going to see and be able to interact with. In fact, if I go to the streets view, turn them all on, we've got cooperative gestures. So that's your sort of your mobile stuff. So the pinch to zoom, sort of things. So you can optionally disable that if you want. And then if we just, let's take ourselves in a little bit closer to sort of street level. And then we can tilt this one a little bit. Yeah, and so this is just to show you really what the difference between these 3D buildings and etc. are. So that's quite neat. These are all on-offable. You can't bind these. Everything under the map default. So the latitude and longitude that you want to center it on, they're bindable. The zoom level is bindable, and the pitch itself is bindable also. So you can get quite creative, I guess. In fact, if we take this right next, we can see more of the UK. You can get quite creative with the interactivity on the map based on that. Of course, a map in itself isn't much use without some data. So we'll have a quick look at how you plot some of your data on that. Let's just take a look at this one. So here we have map of the UK with some data plotted on it. So we'll have a look as to how we do that. And that is under location data here. So just like plotting data points on a chart in Squirrel, it's the same concept to plot your data points on a map. So you choose the area that you want to bind to, and you can add multiple series of markers or location data as well. So this one, we've gone for a location type of address. So what that is doing is I can put in Bristol, UK, Swindon, UK, and that is geocoding that, turning that into a lat and long to place the markers on there. There's also the options, if you've got lat long data, to work with that directly, and then that bypasses the need to geocode it. But we can add a second series. Let's say for group 2 there, it's address type data still. So just quickly plot those on, but we want a different color maybe for that one. To identify them. So dead easy to get data into your maps. Works just the same way as we're familiar with for charts, really. And then what if we want to get a bit more exciting with this and look at some sort of level of interactivity as well. So here we have a map but perhaps we want to configure our data insertion to provide us with the ability to sort of make the map more interactive and get some information. So if we look at the data that I've got here, I've got information to me like a rep ID or a distributor ID, a name, email addresses, lat long, and so on. And then again, it works just the same way as you're probably already familiar with for data insertion on other components. So we've got our marker series here, which is made up of all of this data, so lat and longs down to row 75. We've got our marker color defined, and then we've got data insertion working on this now. So that when I click on a pin, it's going to, in this case, do row-based insertion. So I'm saying, get me the corresponding row from this block of data and insert it into here. And as we know, as soon as we've got data sitting in a place, I can bind my labels. So what you can't see here is I've got things like the name text label bound to that email and so on. So if we now, let me just change because I personally prefer that. And we'll go in and preview this one now. And then what we can see is as I click, it's doing the data insertion. So then we can get kind of like an info box or information just by mapping that same block of data to the data insertion capability of the component. And yeah, just the interactivity there. So you've got pan with the hand, got the ability to spin, standard mapping capabilities there. I think that is all on Mapbox. Yeah, that was everything I had on that one. And then Rich, the only other thing we were going to talk about, I think, was Designer in the browser itself. So the designer experience in a browser, hence the term designer in a browser. So what we've done, and it's what's driven a lot of those other enhancements that you've seen in terms of the file manager, the image library, those sorts of things, you can now get the exact same experience that you get from the desktop tool in the browser. So now we're in here, and then there are those two files that I was just previously working with in the desktop client. So access to my image library, my files, yeah, basically, that is exciting. What was I doing with my mobile grid thingy? Not a lot by the looks of it. So yeah, the same design experience. In terms of any differences, we were aiming for complete feature parity. I believe the only thing that's really different is the working with local files. Would you agree, Rich? That's the only thing that when we're in the browser, you have to export from the file manager if you want to get a .sqrl file out. There's no like save local option for it. And if you want to bring a local Squirrel file into the browser version, you have to do that as an import. So if you get open project and you want to browse your local machine, you're to find that file, then you would do that via the import project button, and then it becomes a cloud saved file.
Yeah, so you can download the file once it's on the file. So you can click on the context menu and choose to download that file, and that will create the physical SQRL file. But yeah, if you're in the design, you can't export to Squirrel. It has to be saved first and then be downloaded at the moment. Yeah.
Other than that, it should be working exactly the same.
So the release of 1.18 is going to see design in the browser. We're calling it a soft launch rather than a full launch, not because of anything to do with features or supportability. It's just purely, we found an issue. I've just literally today posted out a blog post about it. We found an issue last year to do with the performance of the design in the browser in locations with slow internet. And so we wanted to address that before we do a big bang and launch and say this new design experience is available to everybody. So it will be available once 1.18 goes live, and then there will be an announcement about it. And then when we do get the performance issue addressed, we will get that put out very soon. We're aiming for Q1 this year to get that done properly. So we've had a question come in saying, are there any plans to allow container sizes to be set as percentages of screen height or width rather than absolute pixels. Absolutely, I think that's definitely a good enhancement we can make, because you do see that in lots of cases where you want particular percentages and to fit that rather than saying 50 pixels, we want it to be 25% of the device. It's not in there day one, but that's definitely an enhancement idea that we can put down and make it available.
I think Graham started looking at that already, actually. So hopefully that's hopefully he hasn't found any blockers, and that'll be on the way. We'll have to just think about the UI element to how we manage that. But yeah, good. It would be a nice feature.
Yeah. Another question that's come in is: are there any costs for storing projects in the cloud or for using the design in the browser?
Yeah. So with any plan, there is a storage limit associated with it. I don't think anybody's ever got near the limits that have been set. So there is the some of it would count towards your storage limit. So images in the asset library or image library, they would count towards it. The saving of the Squirrel file to the cloud would count towards it. Versions don't, so they're excluded from that. But we'll share some more information, Rich, once we've got those limits fully defined as part of the release. We'll be sharing some information about that as well, I believe.
Yeah, things we've done as well. So part of the asset library, for example, when you're uploading an image, it automatically converts it into a much smaller file. So for example, we had a test file that we had was just under 5 meg in size, and as part of the conversion, it reduced it down to about 250k. So things like that we can do that won't impact the quality of the image, but will massively reduce the size. It serves two purposes. One, it reduces the amount of disk space that's being consumed when you're storing it. But two, which is more important for us, is the end user experience when you're viewing those images at runtime. Because the browser's having to download such a smaller file, it's a lot more responsive and a lot quicker as well. But as Mel mentioned, we're refining what those limits are. But at the moment, looking at our customer base and then looking at the projects that people have created, no one's anywhere close to it. But things like the versions, we're not going to be counting that towards the project limit, because we want people to use it. We don't want to discourage people from saving a file, so it's just more convenient.
Yeah, and we don't want to produce a sort of housekeeping headache for people either, where they need to go through deleting older versions to free up space. So they've been excluded from that.
Yeah.
And then, how long will the desktop client be supported? Jim asks as well. The intention is forever. So I mentioned that there is parity between the two. A couple of things like the handling of local files is different. But I mean, Rich, you can talk to it from a technical perspective, but essentially the code base for the desktop client and the web version, the browser version, is the same. So that was done very deliberately, so that we could continue to support both and maintain and keep parity between them.
Absolutely. So when we first started architecting and building Squirrel, we always had the vision of it becoming a web-based application, but equally we also knew that we had people that would want to use it desktop-based as well. So we chose a technology stack that would allow us to deliver both platforms without us having to re-engineer the code. So the work that we've done for design in the browser, we've probably spent the past 12 months on doing it, hasn't been to re-engineer the code base to make it web supported. It was always a web application at the start. What we've done is we've enhanced the capabilities, so like for the asset library and the cloud storage and the auto versioning and the auto saving, and then retrofitting that now back into the desktop client as well. So there are no plans to deprecate it. In fact, we're doing a lot of R&D into the technology that we're using to convert the application into a desktop application to bring that up to speed. So at the moment we use a product called Electron, which is what lots of other platforms use. So Microsoft Teams, up until recently, was an Electron application. Slack was an Electron application. So there's a number of other big applications that are Electron. They've slowly moved into other products, and we'll be looking at that as well to try and improve the supportability of those applications going forwards as different operating systems and browsers come into come into the market. But we have absolutely no plans to get rid of that, because we know we've got a number of people that use Squirrel when there's no internet connectivity, when they're on airplanes, when they're on trains with low internet connectivity. Myself, when I'm in a hotel in Arizona with really bad internet, for example, that's what hit the issue with designing the browser. It wasn't performing when I was in the hotel, but the desktop client does, because everything's local. So there are no plans to do that, and we're looking to ensure that feature parity exists across both the platforms.
Awesome. I think that's it on questions. That's probably it for our content as well.
Yeah, that was it. I think mobile design the browser is the end one. Yeah.
Brilliant.
So timelines for this is looking like to go live Wednesday next week, and at the same time we'll also, at the moment, design the browser isn't available, but at the same time we will remove the block on design the browser, and we'll put a post out in the community to let everyone know what the URL is and how they can get access to it and use it.
Cool. Brilliant. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks all.
Cheers then. Bye-bye.
Thanks. Bye.